Well, good morning, Unity of Music City. Hello, everybody online. It's great to see everybody here. Great to see all your smiling faces. Today is the second Sunday of October, and we can feel it, can't we? We can see it. We can feel it. It's going to be a beautiful day. We're going to have a beautiful service. So we're going to start our service by singing two songs back to back. We're going to have fun. We're going to get our energy up. We're going to get it focused for having a great service today. So everybody, let's stand. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All around this neighborhood, I'm gonna let it shine. All around this neighborhood, I'm gonna let it shine. All around Goodlettsville, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I won't let anyone blow it out. I'm gonna let it shine. Won't let anyone blow it out. I'm gonna let it shine. Won't let anyone blow it out. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine, y'all. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. One more time. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All that is on your mind today, take it to God in prayer. When you have fears that won't go away, take it to God in prayer. Turn it over, turn it over, Please be seated.
Good morning, Unity of Music City. Today's centering statement is, care for the earth and all its creation is the natural act of our spiritual stewardship. In most major religions, there is a scripture encouraging the protection and care of nature. From Buddhism to Christianity and Hinduism to Islam, faiths recognize the need for environmental stewardship and urge followers to be the caretakers of the planet and its biodiversity. Our first spiritual principle states that a direct relationship with the universal presence, known by many names, is available to everyone. This universal presence is the creator of the earth, and any spiritual journey that brings us closer to this divine presence brings us closer to the earth. Environmental stewardship allows us to participate alongside the divine, caring for the systems that were designed as an expression of love. Good stewardship highlights the beauty of creation and honors its creator. Sustainability allows us to share God's love with future generations. What are we waiting for? What effort can we begin today to put this principle into action? Each of us can take our own individual actions, and when we combine these efforts with like-minded souls in our community, there is no limit to the positive impacts that we can make on God's green earth. And now please repeat these affirming statements after me. I am grateful to Mother Earth for all that she gives me. I am grateful to Mother Earth for all that she gives me. I make conscious choices that lovingly support the environment. I make conscious choices that lovingly support the environment. I am supported by the earth and rooted in my purpose. I am supported by the earth and rooted in my purpose, and so it is.
So it is. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Happy Sunday, and I wanted to tell you where you are right now. You're at Unity of Music City, and what does that mean? Well, we are a place for authentic transformation, and that means that no matter where you are on your spiritual journey, when you walk in those doors, you're here to find support on your spiritual path. You're here to be in a place of learning and fellowship, and we're here just to love on you wherever you are, whoever you are, it doesn't matter. And right along with that, I want to kind of talk through our mission, vision, and purpose statements. We do this once a month. I just want you to kind of take a deep breath and breathe into these statements, because these are our founding principles. This is how the whole world knows who Unity of Music City is. Our mission is that we create experiences for expanding consciousness and awakening infinite possibilities. Our vision is to remember the universal presence alive in each of us, and our purpose is to create a sacred space for authentic transformation. And so it is. Sherry, do we have any announcements?
Yes, we have a few.
A few.
Always denial. Glasses. Our new youth program has begun. So if you have a young person who you would like to share in some playful, spiritual, uplifting activities, this is the place. Not today because it's family day, but any other Sunday, yes. So see Stephanie Jacobs for if you would like your child to be included in that. There is a wish list on our website and a link in the weekly happenings for needed items, such as to launch our youth ministry to help us with that. We thank you in advance for reviewing this list so that you can participate. It's always more special when we can contribute, right? We're a part of it. We thank you for all your giving on that. We're thankful and appreciate you a lot. We are also looking for monthly volunteers for the youth ministry. Please speak with Stephanie again if the youth program speaks to you and you would like to be a part of that. Full Moon Gathering today, this evening at 7 p.m. right here. Bring a chair. Oh, well, of course, out there. But if some of you haven't been out there, it's a cool place. So bring a chair, bring a drum if you have one, crystals, sage, or whatever calls to you. We'll build the fire. All right, safely. I know we're in a drought, so don't worry. I heard about the fire, and I thought, we're in a drought. My yard is crunchy. So, but everybody's got that. Don't worry. Be happy. We are planning a fall harvest gathering on the grounds here in early November. All right. Yes. And we're inviting all members and friends. Okay. So if you've got a friend, you think, it's a good time to just introduce them to my spiritual peeps. Bring them. This is a potluck, so bring your favorite dish to share. We will provide the drinks and the plates, etc. Let's take some time to catch up, get to know each other better, and share some memories and make new ones. Bring your lawn chair. Don't forget to do that. Sit around the fire and bring a drum or shaker or anything you want your voice, If you don't have any of that stuff, you can make sounds with your mouth, We'll accept that too. We will, yes, yeah. We will join our hearts and our voices to ceremony to bless our new home. We may even manage to get the peace poles there. Some of you here, you may not know we have peace poles. Some of you are new and you don't know that we have peace poles. We had those at our former location, and they were are very, very sacred and special to us. So may reintroduce those into their new space. Let's see. I think that's it. Oh, so put it on your calendar and make plans to be here Saturday, November the 5th. I knew there was a date there. From 2 to 5, rain or shine. Okay, November 5th. When?
November 5th.
And what, Saturday? Yes. Okay, good job.
What was the time?
Oh, the time, 2 to 5.
2 to 5.
Good, they've got it. That's it for today.
All right. Well, it's time to sing again. It's time for the monthly mantra. We introduced this song last week, and we had so much fun. It's called We Come Together, and it's about putting into action the things that we teach every Sunday here, looking at the person next to you and realizing the God within them, coming together in the name of love. So let's all stand and sing. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Take a look at the person next to you. Say, God loves you and I love you too. Now feel the love in the sanctuary. Lift your voice and repeat after me. at the person next to you. Say, I recognize the God in you. I feel the love in the sanctuary. Lift your voice and repeat after me. We come together. We come together. We come together. In the name of love, we come together. We come together. We come together. In the name of love, from every walk of life, every creed and color, in kinship we unite, in honor of the God in each other. Take a look at the person next to you. Say, namaste, I bow to you. Now feel the love in the sanctuary. Lift your voice and repeat after me. We come together. We come together. We come together. In the name of love, we come together. We come together. We come together. We come together. In the name of this is you. We come together. 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 In the name of love, we come together. Together. We come together. We come together. In the name of love. Everybody have a seat. Thank you so much.
Wow.
How much fun is that?
Let's come together in the name of love, shall we? As we enter into this meditative portion of our service, I invite you to close your eyes. Get comfortable in your seat. Let your tongue fall away from the roof of your mouth and rest. Drop your shoulders. See if you can become just 5% more relaxed. In the pure presence of the divine is pure relaxation, pure rest. And I invite you in this moment to take any concerns that you may have, any conflicts or rub that you have in your life, any worries or uncertainties, and just set them down. They don't get to come into this space. Now, you might feel some resistance about that because your personhood, the ego self, sometimes finds its identity in struggle. You might get a little nervous when you want to set the struggle down. You can appease it by letting it know that you'll pick it all back up again when it's time. But for this moment, as we come together here in the name of love in this community, we step into a more sacred place. The place of oneness and connection that is the truth and the essence of who we are. We come come into this place together as a community to reinforce our shared value of commitment, our shared value of oneness, our shared values of love, joy, and peace. And for just a moment together, we bask in that energy of oneness and love in the silence. In the silence. This place of oneness is the only place from which we can truly say, the God in me beholds the God in you. The Christ in me beholds the Christ in you. It is the place of namaste. It is the place of awareness and awakeness. It is the place from which we know that we know that we know that I live and move and have my being in God. And God lives and moves and has her being in me. Namaste.
I am in God. God is in me.
don't know about you, but that was just a beautiful little moment for me. I hope it was for you as well. Welcome to October. It feels like October. It looks like October. Quacks like a duck, walks like a duck. That's what my father used to say. It must be a duck. I'm so excited about tonight. I'm so excited about our first full moon gathering. This has been something that I felt Spirit nudging us to do for a while. This past week, I had the honor of being on This Is Nashville on the radio. I don't know if y'all heard this, about Nashville's pagan community. And it was a wonderful opportunity to put our name out there. I want you to know that after that episode, I saw quite a little bump in social media follows and stuff like that. So there are people in our world, of course, that we would relate to very closely. But the idea of church feels a little strange to them. A place they don't feel comfortable. So I have probably, Ryan says I'm one of them. So I have no idea what's going to happen tonight. Spirit knows, but we have had more response to this social media post than any other thing we've put on there. So I'm anticipating some faces we've never seen before, some spirits we've never interacted with before, bringing their energy into ours. And I hope that many of our regular folks will be there helping us hold the space of what we really are. I'm so grateful that Ryan mentioned again our mission, our vision, and our purpose statement. And what I was thinking as you were reading that, Ryan, about how those came about a long time ago. That is the one place where we reach way back into our spiritual history. And those have never changed. They've never changed because we've never needed to. They say what we want them to say. So I love that. So today, last week I mentioned that while I was in Denver, I had managed to set a boundary, and it felt so good, right? And so then somehow this week I started thinking about oneness and boundaries, and how do those two things function with each other. We talk about oneness. It's one of our belief statements. We believe in oneness, but how does that fit with this idea of setting healthy boundaries, right? So in my American literature class, there's a poem I always teach by Robert Frost. It's called Mending Wall. And it starts like this. It starts, something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen groundswell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun. And so, of course, the first thing I always ask my students is, what is it that doesn't love a wall? Help me identify what it is he's talking about. Something there is that doesn't love a wall and sends the frozen groundswell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun. And, of course, one of the really great answers is nature. Nature obviously doesn't love a wall because it has a tendency over time to have walls crumble down, right? So this wall that he's talking about is a wall that looks like this. You've probably seen some of those around Nashville. We have some around Nashville that still date from the Civil War. But this is the good old-fashioned way of building a wall. Just find rocks that'll stack on one another, and we'll build that little wall and nothing will get through. And this is the kind of wall Frost is talking about. And he says it's springtime, and so it's time once again for my neighbor and I to meet. He on his side of the wall, I on my side of the wall. And we walk along, and I pick up the boulders that have fallen to my side, and he picks up the boulders that have fallen to his, and we replace the boulders on the wall. And this makes total sense where there are cows and sheep and other kinds of grazing animals. But then he asks this question. There where it is, we do not need the wall. He is all pine and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines. I tell him, why do we need this wall? And the neighbor responds simply. Anybody know what the neighbor says? You remember from American literature? Good fences make good neighbors, right? And he goes on and he pushes it just a little bit farther. And he says, but why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out. That line right there always makes me just kind of sit with it. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. And once again, the neighbor says, good fences make good neighbors. That's his whole response. I always tell my students, anytime a poet wastes precious words repeating a line, you better pay attention to it. Because that's what the poet is trying to tell you. Good fences make good neighbors. So we understand this. Frost understood this back in the 30s or 40s when he was writing this poem, right? This idea that how do we stay in good relationship with one another? Well, sometimes we build a wall. Sometimes we build a boundary, right? We build healthy boundaries, and we know this idea of healthy boundaries. It can include a lot of things, but it certainly includes some of these at times. I think different boundaries have to come up in different relationships and in different scenarios, in different situations. That's why there's an art to living. So staying true to your sense of self, I think, is the ultimate reason for boundaries. In order for me to stay true to my sense of self, I have to create a protected space where I can be that. The ability to say no. How many people need to say amen to that one right now? Right? Amen. Identifying specific behaviors in others that you will not allow. I remember several years ago when I first started my teaching career, there was the department chair who had a little bit of a reputation, and I had several people pull me aside and say, now you're going to love it here, you're going to love working in this department, but let me just warn you, everyone in the department at some point or another is called into the chair's office and screamed at. And I said, well, that's not going to happen to me. And they said, oh, but it happens to everybody. And I said, it's not going to happen to me. I said, part of the reason is because in order for someone to scream at me, I have to participate in that. And I won't. I didn't even have the language all those many years ago to know that I was setting a boundary for myself. What I would accept and what I would not accept, right? Ownership and agency over your financial resources can be a boundary, especially in terms of really close relationships. Sometimes we have to say, that's sometimes the hardest place to draw really firm boundaries is in your closest relationships, right? Family, stuff like that, and say, no, this has got to be a boundary for me. Reserving the right to change your mind has been my mantra since my early 20s. I always reserve the right to change my mind. Prioritizing your personal time, protecting your physical space, that basic expectation of respect that we all are allowed to have, and protecting the right to personal spiritual growth. Those are some. You've probably come up with many of your own. There's lots. There's going to be as many as there are people. You decide what you have to draw around yourself, right? I started thinking about it since I am, a word nerd. I started thinking about, I always go back to the dictionary. Always go back to the dictionary. So I tell my students, nobody looks at a dictionary more than an English professor, because we know how important it is. And I looked up the term for boundary, and the definition is a line that marks the limits of an area, a dividing line. Okay, it's got a couple of words in there that don't really fit with oneness, right? Words like limits and dividing. Because when we look up oneness, now, Merriam-Webster may not define oneness exactly the way I would define it, but we're going to go back there anyway. And Merriam-Webster says, the fact or state of being unified or whole, though comprised of two or more parts. And I would go a step further than that, and I would talk about the fact that in our true oneness, there is no division, there is no two or more parts. But then we get into splitting some very, very fine spiritual hairs. So to begin understanding how we can deal with the idea of healthy boundaries in an energy of oneness, I think it's important to go back and think about who we are, right? Who we are as beings on this planet. Who are we? I've talked about this many, many times. I've got a little visual representation here. You guys have seen this little box that I bring with me. I know it's my favorite thing because for me, it immediately reminds me of that idea of oneness. It's kind of like a Buddha statue. I keep a Buddha statue at home because I just have to look at it and mindfulness, be mindful, right? These symbols mean something. And so every time I look at this box, I think to myself, remember who you are. Because this outer box, of course, is the ego, or what I prefer to call it, the personhood. It's a term Muji uses a lot. You know he's one of my teachers. And so personhood, this is the personhood, the physical self, my name, my identity, who I am, right? All those things, my talents, my skills, all that kind of stuff. And then inside, we have kind of another layer of personhood. Maybe I think about my deeper layer, my desires, my wishes, right? The things that I hide maybe in my heart and I don't share so readily, so easily. But that still is existing in this material existence out in this world that I'm in right now, right? And then sometimes, many of us, if you're like me, you spent years and years and years just trying to get down to that observer self. We heard Eckhart Tolle talk about it, and we heard Oprah Winfrey talk about it, so we knew we had to have one. If Oprah says it, we know we have it. And so we try to get to this observer self, and when we get there, it feels like we've gotten somewhere. But really, that observer self, for me, maybe not for you, but that observer self over time became identified with my person. That observer self became something that I could identify. I could recognize it. And if I can see it, it's not me. If I can identify it, it's not me. Right? So it became, too, kind of the most spiritual part of my ego. A lovely place. I love being there. It's a lovely place to be. But then to remember that what underlies all of that is the divine presence, the oneness, right? That place that is the divine in me, beholding the divine in you. That's who we are. But even this is difficult. Even this is not quite right, because when we're trying to visually get across the idea of oneness, we have to use dimensions like inside and outside, higher and lower, up and down. And the truth is that presence doesn't understand any of that. Presence doesn't feel in a dimensional world. Have you ever had an oral photograph taken? If you've ever had a photograph of your aura taken, the first one that I had looked a lot like the top left. It was so yellow, 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 yellow. And they're like, ooh, you got this little shocker right here. You need to unblock, or maybe you need to block it. I don't know. I can't remember what they told me to do. But at any rate, that was about 25 years ago, the first time I had that done. So when we see that, we can see that the energy of a person is something that extends beyond the person themselves. It extends beyond the being that you are. Many of you know that my former partner from many, many years ago had a ruptured aneurysm. Emmy had a ruptured aneurysm, was in the hospital in ICU. And I remember that one of the first times that I was allowed to go back into the ICU and see her after her brain surgery, her first brain surgery, I took Patricia Ryder with me. Patricia was the minister of Unity at that time. And so she went back there with me, and because I was scared, I was nervous, all of my ego, my person, I like person better because ego has a negative connotation, right? And person is just all the stuff of who we are. And so my person was nervous and anxious and scared and in shock and all the things that a person can be. And I went back in there, and Patricia stood up at the head of the bed, a place where I was afraid to go yet. I was afraid to get too close to Emmy's head because she had a whole side of her head shaved and a huge scar and tape over it and all this kind of stuff. As the nurse practitioner had told me, she had a line going in and out every God-made and man-made orifice in her body, right? Lots of things beeping around her. It was a very, very strange place for me to be. And as we stood there, Patricia stood up at the head of Emmy's bed, and she started just moving her hand around like this, not touching Emmy's head, but getting close to it and farther away and closer to it and farther away. And eventually she held her hand about 4 feet out, and she said, Emmy's energy is right here. This is where she's holding on right here. She's hanging out right here while this heals, right? This is where she is. And I trusted that because I had no reason not to, and it felt right to me. And I think it goes along with that idea that we have energy that extends way beyond the physical being that we are, and it impacts our world, right? And I think we can go even one step further with understanding who we are. I like this photo here. This almost flips it backwards. I like to think of that darkest shadow in the middle as the personhood, the ego, the person self, because it's most in the shape of who we are, right? Here we are in our shape, in our form. And then outside of us, kind of hovering around us, is our spiritual ego, our spiritual person that understands a little bit more than just our body does. And outside that are our desires and our secrets. And then the presence that we are, the divine presence that we are one with, I like to think of as those circles outside. It no longer has the form that we do. It is formless. It doesn't require a shape, right? It's just around us. We move in it and through it. In it and through it, we have our being. So, this ego person just showed up. And I'm not going to talk bad about him at all. Because he's back here electronically, guiding me. This ego person's kind of like this. Right? This is our ego. This is our person. I was listening a couple of nights ago to a satsang of Adyashanti. Adyashanti is one of my favorite teachers as well. Muji and Adyashanti, they're my guys. They both teach non-duality. I love the way that they approach it. And he was talking about the ego, and he said, sometimes the ego becomes the spiritual fall guy. Like no matter what happens, we can turn around and blame the ego, right? We can talk about how ego is showing up. Ego becomes the fall guy for everything. But as he was sharing the other night, he said, but ego doesn't create. Ego's not the co-creator self. Ego's the poor little dude who's trying to negotiate the experience. Ego's the poor little dude that has to deal with the experience that is being lived. If ego created, ego wouldn't create the crap it has to live through. If ego created, it would create easy situations. Think about when you sit down to meditate for the first time, when you first tried to teach yourself how to meditate. You knew somewhere in the depth of your spirit this was good for you, it was calling to you. The presence that you are wanted to rest in silence and stillness. The presence that you are wanted to commune with the rest of your beingness, right? But your ego fought it every step of the way. I don't know how to do this. If I get still, what will I learn about myself? Oh my gosh, I'm having to do this. You're making me do this. I've often talked about the ego as the toddler self. It's kind of our little toddler, and our presence inside of us is the adult going, okay, you'll learn. Go ahead, touch that hot stove, right? It allows us to learn. It allows our beingness to learn, our personhood to learn. Our experience clearly isn't cooperating with ego because ego gets agitated. So the first thing that we can know about boundaries is this. Boundaries are created for our ego/person and not for the limitless presence of oneness. The divine being that we are doesn't even understand the concept of boundaries. It doesn't understand up or down or in or out. It doesn't even, it's formless. It has no dimension. And that limitless presence of oneness is who we are. It is the I am that I am and you are. And the rest of this is just the form we have that it's our marionette. It's our little puppet that's moving through life. So it made me start to think this week about how we form our boundaries. And I started thinking about the idea that boundaries could be developed by that person, by that ego, right? It's that ego self who develops a boundary and says, you know what, I'm going to develop my boundaries out of the pain of past experience. Somebody hurt me, they will not hurt me again, right? And I'm going to draw a boundary. I'm going to draw a boundary because my boundaries will be designed to avoid suffering. Well, and we could go down a whole Buddhist road with that, couldn't we? About the relationship that we have with suffering and the attempt to try to escape from it, to step outside of it. So when our person develops that, we've been through the suffering. Guess what? The presence has never suffered. It has never felt pain. It is only the place of pure love and pure joy and pure peace. It has never felt it. It would not even understand that. Boundaries developed by the person can sometimes be a little victim-y. Nothing wrong with that. Let me tell you this. Boundaries created by the person, these are not meant to be presented as bad. They're not bad. It's just, I think it behooves us as spiritual growers, spiritual journeyers, to understand these boundaries and where they may come from, and how sometimes, yes, sometimes if I've been damaged or hurt, right? If I've been misunderstood, someone has said something about me, if my mother didn't remember my birthday, whatever, I can get to a victim-y place. And I can go, well, that won't happen again. I just won't let that pain in again. Right? And I can then, my boundary does become a wall. Right? And there's a little difference there. My boundary developed by my person often come from a place of a lack of trust. I can't fully trust you, and maybe I can't fully trust me. I can't fully trust me to get sucked in. I can't fully trust me to not respond. I can't fully trust me to not be codependent in this moment. I can't fully trust me to not to go to a place of anger in this moment. So I'm going to create this because I don't trust you, and at the heart of it, I don't trust me. But boundaries developed out of presence. I think there is such a thing. Because I think that presence that has never suffered, was never born and will never die, that doesn't understand the in and the out or the up or the down, that presence still is fully aware of its full expression on this material world. It's fully aware of this expression that we move through and have our being in. Because you see, when it comes to my beingness, there is a place where I end and you begin. When it comes to my body, when it comes to my person, there's a place where I end and you begin. When it comes to my presence, there's not a place where I end and you begin. We have the same. We are the same. And so boundaries developed by presence wants to protect your personhood. It cares, just like we care about our toddler, right? I don't want you to be hurt. I really don't. I'm going to need to let you learn, but I don't want you to hurt. So boundaries developed by presence come from a place of compassion, right? They live in the energy of nurturing, the energy of being protective, the energy of being loving. Right? Can I create boundaries that I know are there because I love you and I love myself, and therefore I'm going to create this so that we can encounter each other in love? So that we are able to encounter each other in love. Somebody's back here. No, I'm not talking about a person. I'm talking about somebody's back here. Healthy boundaries that originate from our God self help to actually keep us in oneness by keeping us out of our ego. Because the more that I'm in my ego, the less I understand the oneness that I have with you, right? Healthy boundaries. So in other words, boundaries and oneness are not just kind of interesting bedfellows. They actually go together. They participate with one another. We make a decision from presence for our ego so that it doesn't have to negotiate tough stuff on its own. I can come up with loving boundaries in my presence because I care about the person I am and the person you are, the parts of us that feel separate, right? Because I know that if I don't, from a place of presence, that my ego can come up with boundaries that are simply designed to respond to pain and limit. It's thinking about pain, it's thinking about limitation, it's thinking about things I have to put my arm out to and nope, can't accept that. Whereas the presence says, okay, you don't need to do any of that on the level of presence, but I'm going to help create boundaries that will help protect you from that, right? And that's what we can access when we go into the silence. What is my loving boundary? We attempt to protect the ego from pain and suffering because those are often the primary temptations to completely live from our ego self. When we encounter pain, suffering, conflict, often we are sucked right back into our ego because we're contracting. And we're going to a place where I have to protect this. I have to get protective. And the presence is saying, okay, breathe. Let's just all breathe. Let's all breathe and relax. The presence cannot be tempted because it's not temptable. It is the ego that we know is being tempted back into a space of ego. So we have a great model for this. We have the temptation of Jesus. Very famous story in the Bible. It's in 3 of the canonized Gospels, the temptation of Jesus. I was looking a couple of weeks ago. I happened to be on there's a unitytruth.net website that does a lot of metaphysical interpretations based on unity of stories in the Bible. And I remember I was looking at these a few weeks back, and one of the first lines of this metaphysical interpretation was, okay, first, there's no Satan, right? Because we know there's no Satan. That's a construct. That's a human construct. So who was it who was in the desert tempting Jesus? We have a beautiful story here of all the parts of Jesus' personhood showing up, right? His personhood and his presence. So how can you be tempted if you're not temptable? Therefore, it's Jesus the person that we see standing out there, who's constantly moving back into presence in order to respond to this. This is Jesus, the whole person in this story. Now, he's been fasting for 40 days, and 40 days he's been fasting. That's what we know. We don't know much beyond that. I actually went and looked it up because I'm like, can a person really do that? Can you really live for 40 days? If you have no water, no. It's like 2 weeks max. You've got to have water. So assuming that he had access to water, a person can live maybe a month to 2 months with no food, no nutrients at all, if they have water. So we're in the 40-day range, I suppose. But there's a lot of 40 in the Bible, right? And we don't know also if he didn't do, there's a form of fasting that is done in a lot of traditions. It's done for Yom Kippur, it's done for Ramadan, where you fast during the daylight hours. You know, we don't know. As soon as the sun went down, he could have eaten half a goat. I don't know what he did, but nonetheless, he was fasting for 40 days, and that 40 symbolism is all over the Bible. Moses fasted for 40 days. The Israelites wandered in the desert for 40 years. The great flood with Noah was 40 days and 40 nights of rain, right? Goliath mocked Israel for 40 days before David picked up his slingshot and set him straight, right? There's almost 150 references to the number 40 in the Judeo-Christian Bible, right? Saul and David and Solomon each reigned for 40 years. So 40 is considered a generation in the Bible. And there are a couple of places where 40 is mentioned where theologians believe that it's a literal 40. Like there's some places in Deuteronomy where people who sin have to get 40 lashes with something, right? Because that's God before he had kids, when he didn't relax a little bit. And so there's times when we think it was a literal 40, but there's also times where it was not a literal 40. And in fact, many theologians and historians believe that 40 was used during that era to just mean a really long time. Kind of like the way we say, like, I've told you 1,000,000 times. Well, we haven't really told someone 1,000,000 times. So they would often they did it for 40 days. It was 40 nights. They wandered for 40 years, all this kind of stuff. And generally, this 40 is associated with a kind of trial or a kind of test. That's what Jesus is undergoing before he begins his ministry. He's going through this test and this trial. And so there's 3 temptations that Satan, or maybe his ego, or whomever it is, after he's been fasting for 40 days, puts him through, and they're these. Number 1, hey, you know what? If you're God, just turn these stones into bread. You're hungry. Right? If you're God, go up to this high place, throw yourself off the cliff. The angels will catch you. Hey, listen, if you'll just worship me, just one little act of worship toward me, I will make you ruler over everything you see. I mean, that's what you're here for, right? To establish your kingdom on earth. I'll give it to you. It'll be yours. All you have to do are these 3 things. And in fact, these 3 things speak to different parts of Jesus' personhood. If I'm hungry, that's purely physical. right? This temptation to his personhood is saying, I know you're hungry. Go ahead and eat. You need something to eat, right? The second one is a spiritual temptation. Why don't you just jump off this cliff? The angels will catch you. Didn't it say that? The angels will catch you? Right? So that's kind of a temptation of his spirit. And then the third one is a temptation of his ego and his power, his very, very humanness. Because isn't that what drives humans, it so often seems? Let me gain some power. Worship me and I'll make you ruler. And what did he respond to each one of these? He responded the same way. It is written. When he's tempted by the bread, right, he says, it is written that man does not live by bread alone, but by the word of God. And what is he saying when he's saying, it is written? He's saying, I've already established my truth in this. I already know that I live by the presence. I already know what's real and what's not real. I already know the timeless, that part that was not born and will not die. And so I don't have to be tempted in this moment. My presence is not tempted by you. I come right back at you with what has already been established as truth, divine truth. And then Satan turns right around and did what our ego, our person can often do. It used the Bible against Jesus, right? It turned around and Satan said, well, you know what? It's written. It's written that he has placed you in the care of angels. So just go up on this high pinnacle and jump off and let the angels catch you. And Jesus said, it's also written, don't test the Lord your God. Have you ever done that? I've done it. There have been times in my life when I'm like, what about this manifestation stuff? I just don't, you know what? I'm going to do a little test. I'm going to see what happens. And sometimes, every now and then I've had stuff come through for me doing that, but for the most part it doesn't. Because I know that my presence is over there going, don't you test me, child. Right? This is not a game. You're playing an ego game over there right now with this. And I don't play those ego games with you. I don't play those ego games. So don't test me. Right? And then that third one, when he says, I'm going to give you all this land to rule, that's when Jesus says, get thee behind me, Satan. He's basically saying, beat it. Get out of here. I'm done with you. Third time, 3 strikes, you're out. And then he says, it is written, worship the Lord your God and only him. Serve him with absolute single-heartedness. Only care about that in this moment. Only care about the sacred in this moment. Jesus managed to rest in his presence and to say, I'm not going to go there. And I'm going to set a boundary of protection around my person that says, I'm not going to give in, even though it looks like it would be easier in this moment for me to give in. It is already established, the truth with a capital T, and I don't have to negotiate that anymore. My ego would have to negotiate that. My ego would respond by saying, my person would say, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. I need a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? Give me anything right now, and then we'll talk. I'll take anything you're cooking, and then we'll talk. But Jesus didn't give in to that. Instead, he maintained the truth with a capital T. This presence that I am and you are is always with us. Sometimes we feel like it gets lost. Sometimes we feel like the only thing that matters is this person we're walking around in, and the perceived offenses or the perceived slights. Sometimes all we can imagine is this experience that we're trying to negotiate, and sometimes all we can do is walk away and go, well, you know, people drive me crazy. Because if I'm living in my personhood, people are going to drive me crazy every day. If I stay there, people are going to drive me crazy. If I stay there, I'm going to drive me crazy. Right? I'm not going to be able to handle my own stuff. But I have the option, and the option is to step into a place of loving boundaries created by a sense of oneness that arises from the presence that I am, and to live from that space as often as possible. the more that I lean into it, the more that I begin to see from that limitless place the limits of my person. I begin to see the innumerable ways that that person will fail on the daily basis. And it takes a little bit of practice to lean into that more and more and more, because pain and suffering wants to invite me to lean into my person and wants me to create my defense and wants me to respond to pain. And ultimately, the presence is the place where we can stop and say, we don't even have to refuse to do that. We just be. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Reverend Deb. We have a lot to think about after that. I will carry that throughout my week and take that in to my meditations, that's for sure. Let's take just a moment to take a breath here and kind of transition into gratitude, because we have so much to be grateful for. We have our spiritual community. We have all the support of the people around us who love us and who pray for us. We give thanks for this building, this beautiful property that we have, all of the people that are overseeing all of the actions that we're taking. We're so grateful for that. And I want to highlight three things that we are really grateful for, especially this week. Number one, have you walked into the nursery lately? Oh my goodness, the nursery is looking so awesome. We've got a new crib, new items for the kids. I think that is just really taken off. We have so much to be grateful for in starting that youth program. We need volunteers for that. If it's something that you're excited about, please talk to Stephanie about that. The second thing that I want to mention is right there. That door is brand new, and that brand new door is leading to an ADA wheelchair-compliant bathroom that we need for all kinds of different reasons. I'm thinking that it'll probably be a week or so before that gets up and running, so maybe this time next week you'll be able to stick your head in there, or hey, even use the facility, right? The third thing is that we have our sound system in, and I want to thank Eric Thompson for devoting. This past week, he spent a lot of hours in this room, and a lot of hours just kind of walking around and listening to music in this room and listening to it speak to him and tuning the system and all that. It's a monumental effort, and we thank you. Well, we are also grateful to give back to the potential that is this spiritual community. And the way that we do that is we give of our time, talents, and treasures, and we give generously, don't we? From the depths of our hearts and the bottom of our souls. You can see the ways to give there on the screen. The red bucket is there on the back. In the bucket for your paper goods, you can stick your offerings in there. There's other ways to give there on the screen. So let's all say our offertory blessing together. Divine love flows through me, blesses and multiplies all that I choose to give and all that I hope to receive. So let's sing our gratitude as we say thank you, God. Thank you, God, for opening stand together. Sherry, will you lead us in the prayer for protection?
Yes.
All right.
The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.
All is well, life is good. We are truly blessed. All is well, life is good. We are truly blessed. All is well, life is good. We are truly blessed. All is well, life is good. We are truly blessed. All is well, life is good. We are truly blessed. All is well, life is good. We are truly blessed. We are truly blessed. We are truly blessed. All right, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching us online. We appreciate you. Have a great week. We'll see you next